Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast where we explore all things reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and I'll be helping you stay informed around issues like birth control, abortion, sex education, and LGBTQ issues, and much, much more. Giving you the tools you need to take action and fight back. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So, y'all, there was good news last week. What? I know. I'm good news. I mean, lots of bad things also happened, but we're just going to focus on the good news because it is good. Last week, an FDA advisory committee voted unanimously to support a progestin-only birth control pill to be available over the counter. Y'all, this is huge. It has taken us years of advocacy to get to this point. It doesn't mean you can go to your local pharmacy right now and get the pill over the counter yet. The FDA still has to decide to follow the committee's recommendation and approve it for over-the-counter use. So, not yet. We'll know, I think it sounds like maybe in July. So, exciting, good news. Hopefully soon, you will be able to walk into a local pharmacy and get this particular pill available over the counter. It would remove a real barrier to birth control access. And, we should always have bodily autonomy and the ability to make decisions for our body. And this decision to make it available over the counter would really help in making bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom a reality for many. It's not final, but it is a huge step and it could mean a lot. So I'm really excited and it's not everything. It's not abortion access, but it is a big step and it is a reason to be excited. So hopefully soon the FDA will decide that this birth control pill should be available over the counter. And that is something to celebrate. Last week, the Senate also did something to celebrate. Dr. Geeta Rao Gupta, she finally got her nomination approved to be the ambassador at large for global women's issues at the State Department. Y'all, this has been a long road and a long fight to get Geeta approved. So it is so exciting to see her finally get her ambassadorship for the Office of Global Women's Issues. And that is just very exciting. And looking forward to see what she does in this new position. Let's see. In personal, I guess let's still keep it fun and light. So I recently went to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. And y'all, it brought me back to the days when I used to go to the Rock County 4-H fair and would go and see all the animals and walk through the animal barns and go and get the fair food and ride the rides. I mean, the Sheep and Wool Festival did not have rides. Not that I would have ridden them at this age. I definitely not my jam anymore, but it was so fun to go and see all of the sheep. And then there was amazing yarn and other knitting products and things. I didn't get any yarn, but I did get a knitting bowl. So I'm really looking forward to using that and hopefully end cats deciding to chase balls of yarn. That will be a huge win for me. But the fun thing to talk about was we went to a herding demonstration with border collies, and y'all, it was fun to learn how they do it and how they train the dogs, but it quickly descended into absolute chaos when two of the sheep got out and just took off. And then one of the border collies took off to go do its job, right, to get the sheep and try and bring them back. And they were not about to go back through the fence the same way they got out. So they set the people decided they needed to open the gate so the border collie could bring them back in the gate. Well, because they opened the gate, the other two sheep took off and took off down the midway. So then they had to send two more border collies after those sheep. And it was just utter chaos of dogs and sheep and just so many people on the midway. And then just to cap it all off with like comedy of errors, there were two people in those like inflatable Tyrannosaurus costumes, you know what I mean? Walking down the midway, and the sheep started following the Tyrannosaurus, and then you had the border collies chasing the sheep. It was just utter chaos, but it was really amazing because it was like a real demonstration of like how smart and good these border collies are at herding the sheep. They got all four back, even with just like the mass of humanity that they had to herd the sheep around. It was really kind of amazing to see. Anyway, so that was my weekend. It was a lot of fun. I guess with that, let's turn to this week's episode. I'm really excited. I am having one of my favorite people on. I really love Katelyn Burns. She is a wonderful journalist. She's a contributor to MSNBC, but she also co-hosts an amazing podcast called Cancel Me Daddy, which I cannot recommend strongly enough. She does a lot of reporting, particularly on trans issues, and I just love getting a chance to talk to her. So I had her on this week to talk about the new Title IX proposed rule from the Biden administration and why there's some problems. So let's get right to it. Let's get to my interview with Katelyn. Hi, Katelyn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here, one, because I always love having you on. And someday, it will be because things are amazing and like everything's great.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That's my goal. It will happen. I keep resisting. I'm like, something good will happen and I can have her on.
My running joke is nobody ever calls me about good news. So.
I keep like, it's going to happen. I'm going to have good things to talk to you about. But again, like I talk about reproductive health and like trans rights and like there's just not a lot of good.
Yeah, it's tough going in those areas.
Okay, before I get like too carried away, because this has been my new thing, is I get excited and forget. Would you like to take a second and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Katelyn Burns. I'm a columnist for MSNBC and Xtra Magazine. And I'm also co-host of the podcast Cancel Me Daddy.
And y'all, if you're not listening, you really should be, because I love it and listen to it like the second it comes out. It makes me so happy.
It's been sort of an interesting journey that we've been on with that show, because it kind of started out as like my co-host and I just, Oliver, we would make fun of the cancel culture discourse. And I think that discourse itself has changed. And we've more evolved into a show about how people use the internet. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, y'all, it's really wonderful. I really enjoy it. They have fabulous guests, and Katelyn and Oliver are both wonderful, so definitely check it out. Okay, I guess I can't just sit here and talk about your amazing podcast. Yeah, I guess. Okay, you've done a lot of great reporting on trans athletes and sports, and maybe we should start there, because I think this is one of those issues where if you're not really involved in the discourse or know a lot about the issue, like just hearing the top line, you might be convinced that like there's a problem with trans women playing women's sports, but like that's not the case. So let's just like unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I want to start by saying like I completely understand where the average person comes into with this. I want people to sort of think about the assumptions that we have around athletics and gender. And, if you just watch, like, let's say a men's basketball game, a men's basketball game versus a professional women's basketball game, you will notice an athleticism difference. And because most people don't know a trans person, that's the beginning and end of their, like, knowledge of the situation. So what people imagine is like, what if LeBron James all of a sudden, decided to be a woman and play in the NBA? And like, how unfair would that be? And I'm over here like, yes, like that would be very unfair. Okay. If that's all that happened, I would be marching in the streets with the transphobes because that would be unfair. But what people don't understand is the effects that hormone replacement therapy have on a person's body if you put LeBron James on like the same medication that I've been taking for the last 7 years and made him do it for multiple years, he's not going to be flying around the basketball court. Like, he'll still be able to dunk because he's 6'7". But you know what? There are 6'7" women in the WNBA who can also dunk. Like, he wouldn't be the same exact athlete that he is today. And I think that is the sort of sticking point in all of this. You have people like me who say, look, like, the research into this is still very early. Even I admit that it's very early, but from what we've seen, there's no like trans domination of women's sports. You have good athletes who are trans women who have had varying levels of success in women's sports, but it's not like any person, any male athlete can transition and walk into a women's sport and just dominate. So I approach it from a viewpoint of, I think we should opt towards inclusivity before knee-jerking into restriction before we don't fully understand all of this stuff. And I make that case by pointing out, like, look, there hasn't been a truly dominant trans woman athlete to date in any sport. You might sit there and say, well, what about Leah Thomas, the swimmer? And there was so much bad reporting about that just completely like misread the situation. I remember the first time I heard about Leah Thomas was in The Guardian, and they have this one sports writer who has it out about this issue, who I believe is dishonest. And I'm just going to say that, like, you don't even have to cut that part because I believe it. And the very first time I read about Leah Thomas was this guy saying, here's a trans woman athlete who is very likely to smash all of the swimming records in these events. And they're Katie Ledecky's events. Katie Ledecky is the greatest female swimmer of all time, arguably the greatest swimmer regardless of gender. Like, if you compare her times and like Michael Phelps's times against the rest of the field that they're swimming against, like, Katie Ledecky is that much better than the average women's swimmer than Michael Phelps. So in my opinion, she's the greatest female swimmer of all time. Leah Thomas never came close to Katie Ledecky's time. So it started for me with this Guardian reporter saying, this person's going to be better than Katie Ledecky. It's a shoo-in. That hasn't been the case. It will never be the case. Like, Leah Thomas is not anywhere near that level, but that's the level of panic we started with. And it went, from The Guardian, it was all over right-wing news. It hit the New York Times. The New York Times is kind of like, well, this side says it's fine, and the other side says it's like unhuman, whatever. They have to get, everybody's opinion, and they don't actually verify anything for themselves. But if you take a closer look at Leah Thomas's career, she was an Ivy League swimmer. The Ivy League is not the premier college swimming league in the country. In fact, the Ivy League does not issue athletic scholarships to begin with. So notoriously, the Ivy League is like weaker than other leagues. So the fact that she was dominating the Ivy League does not mean she was dominating women's swimming. If you look at the national championship meet where Leah Thomas did win one event and lost like 3 others, she did well, did not dominate. There was a swimmer there that won like 6 gold medals, like, in national championships. And I don't understand why the headlines weren't about that swimmer rather than Leah Thomas. So even like that example, which is always held up as like, this is the reason why we have to kick trans women out of women's sports, it doesn't hold up to close scrutiny. And I just wish that more people would have an open mind and maybe take an examination of their own assumptions around gender and sports before they jump in with, common sense opinions, so to speak.
I guess before we go any further, I mean, I have lots of thoughts, but like, let's just talk a little bit about like what's happening in the States. Like, there's a lot happening around trans sports, women playing sports in states. So what are we seeing at the state level?
At the state level, I think more than half the country now has banned trans girls from any sort of women's or girls' sports, and that includes like high school and middle school age. That's really problematic because I think it's especially heinous at the middle school level because if you have an out trans girl in middle school, she's likely not have gone through, a lot of her own male puberty. She's likely on puberty blockers at the very least. And, before that age, boys and girls athletes are typically put together because their bodies are developing the same. And it's not until the sex hormones kick in that you start to see a differentiation in cis athletes. So the fact that they're going all the way back in like some of these states are banning elementary schools from having trans girls and girls sports. And I'm like, why are there gender segregated sports in elementary school to begin with? When I was growing up, the boys and girls all played, soccer, basketball, everything together. So it brings up deeper philosophical questions for me than just what do we do with these trans girls? And there's one example in Kentucky in particular I wanted to highlight where there was only one trans girl playing a school sport that they could find in the entire state. And she was like 11 years old, and she was like the driving force in her school starting a girls field hockey team. So because of her efforts, the school had a team. If she hadn't bothered to do anything, there would be no team at all. And she is the only person that state's ban on trans athletes affects, and she's now no longer allowed to play on the team that she created.
I mean, this is where I get like,
like how can somebody justify this to me? Like,
no,
you're telling me that this 11-year-old little girl is a threat to the safety of women athletes? No. So to me, this is where it starts jumping from we have legitimate concerns into no, you're really just outright discriminating based on your own bigotry. And I get that this is a complicated issue for people, but like look at how these like policies are actually being applied. And it doesn't make any sense.
They're just like, kids trying to live their life.
There's maybe 24 of them in the entire country. There's probably more laws banning trans girls from school sports than there are trans girls trying to play school sports in the entire country. I looked into there was this uproar in this tiny part of Vermont, which is super progressive. We'll never see a ban there. If that state passes a ban, trans people are really in trouble. And there was a girls basketball player, and apparently she was just good at blocking shots and didn't really have much else to her game, was not the best player on her own team. And there's a Christian school that just flat out refused to play this team. And I took a closer look into the situation, and the team with the trans girl was not dominant. They lost like 7 or 8 times over the course of the season. It was the state tournament. It was a state tournament game that the Christian school forfeited, and then the team with the trans girl got blown out in the next round. It's like I'm looking for cases of like these trans girls or women dominating these sports, and I'm not finding them. There's been one openly trans woman Olympian in Olympic history. It was at the last Olympics. She was a weightlifter. All of the conservative papers are like, this is unfair. She's going to win the gold medal automatically. Like, why even have the competition? Because it's so, obviously this man, quote unquote, is going to win. And she finished dead last in the entire field. And she was not a favorite to win. It was literally all bigotry and assumptions. And I would just like the policy side, the policy discussions to be based in fact and not in like the assumptions and preconceived thoughts of mostly male politicians and sports administrators.
This whole conversation just makes me so mad. Like I just think about like the trans girl who just like wants to play sports with her friends, man. Like like let her live her life. It boggles my mind that we're trying to make her life harder.
And like before we get too deep into it, let me like clarify my own qualifications on this. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, a 2-sport athlete in college, in male sports. I also got a degree in sport management from the University of Massachusetts, which is one of the better schools for that program in the whole country. So I do have a background in like sport management and policy. So I'm not just coming at this from the perspective of like a trans journalist. Like this is like what I sort of have devoted my life to even before my transition. Like I hope your listeners understand that I am not just coming at this with like an emotional argument. It's there's some educational background to it. I'm not just some dumbass, okay?
Not just. Okay, so I guess
Yeah.
that brings us to like today's like main topic
Yeah.
is the Biden administration proposed a new Title IX rule that like
Yeah.
in the flurry of reporting around it, like I'm sure nobody knows what is in it because it was like, this is amazing, this is
Yeah.
terrible. Like it was all over the place from paper to paper. So,
Yes.
Katelyn, what?
Okay. So to understand where we are, we have to understand where we've been. Your listeners who've been really in tune with trans rights for the last like 7 or so years will probably remember the Obama administration's Title IX guidance on trans students. It was literally just a guidance like, here are suggested guidelines for including transgender students in your general education policy. And it was really revolutionary at the time because it was the first time the federal government came out and said, hey, you are denying an equal educational opportunity if you're keeping like trans girls out of the girls' room or trans boys out of the boys' room. At the time, there was a big push to try to make trans kids use third spaces like faculty facilities, but those facilities weren't designed for students, right? So what ended up usually happening, and this has been the case in numerous federal cases, a trans student would ask to go to the bathroom and they'd have to go 10 minutes further away to get to the bathroom than their cisgender counterparts. And what courts ruled is that extra 20 minutes outside of the class is a denial of educational opportunity. So like that's sort of like where it all started. And then that was like one of the first times that the political right sort of blew up over trans rights. They're like, they're trying to put boys in your little girls' bathrooms, like all of that stuff.
Oh yes, the glory days.
Yeah. So then, flash forward and Trump is elected. And I actually had some insider info on what they were talking about in the Bush educational, like the education department, because I had my ex actually was sitting in on meetings and then giving me secret information that was off the record, which is on the record now. But basically, trans rights organizations came in, like I think Caitlyn Jenner consulted on this. This was in like 2017-ish, right around there. There were, what is it? The Log Cabin Republicans before they turned into like this, whatever it is they are now, where they're like, we love gay people, but fuck trans people. They sat in on it, like there were white papers produced, and they were talking about this guidance and like how the Trump administration might try to change it. And my impression from my ex is they had approached it in good faith, but the document they ended up producing was not in any way produced in good faith. Like somebody on the political side got a hold of it and it's like, here's some red meat for our base. Trans students no longer have rights, and they released their own guidance. So flash forward to now with the Biden administration, they now have to put out something to replace the Trump guidance. And rewinding, because I realized I forgot to mention the sports side, the Obama era policy said you cannot deny any trans student any educational opportunities that would be provided to a cisgender peer, and that included sports. So this is where the Biden administration departed from the Obama era. I had heard this was coming down the pipeline for a while. And of course, I never get bits and bobs of information that are actually verifiable. So it's not like I can run out and report it, but you hear rumors that things are happening behind the scenes. And I had heard that they were struggling with the sports issue. It doesn't poll particularly well for Democrats. And as we know, Democrats are particularly afraid of polls instead of just making an argument, but that's a story for another day. um, and so what we got a few weeks ago was this Title IX guidance that was basically like, you cannot deny. It was the Obama era policy. You cannot deny a transgender student the same opportunities as their cisgender peers, except there are certain cases on an individual basis where trans athletes may be denied the right to compete with trans girls with cisgender girls, basically. I got really frustrated because the entirety of the advocacy industrial complex on the liberal side came out in lockstep and said, "This is so great. You have secured rights for transgender students for the rest of time, whatever, until the next Republican president gets elected." And we had I talked to a couple of trans legal experts, people who have operated in the LGBT legal space, and they're looking at it and they're like, okay, well, this actually makes it really difficult for these states to institute their blanket bans. It means that whenever a state athletic association denies a trans girl the right to play in girls' sports, they have to individually justify their decision. It has to be based on something that's individual about the person besides just their trans status, which I think is the most positive thing about this guidance. First of all, it protects trans students outside of sports, and that's great. And we should applaud the Biden administration for that. We should also applaud them for making it more difficult to institute blanket bans on trans girls and girls' sports. But there's a little part in the back of my brain that looks at this and says, okay, we started from a position of there are no exceptions to discrimination against trans students. And what we have today is a Democratic president coming out and saying there are some cases in which discrimination against trans students is necessary. And that, I think, has been the goal of conservatives all along with all of this. They don't really care about women's sports. What they really care about is classifying trans women as men under the law and trans men as women under the law. That's what they have been going for all along, because it legally erases us from existence. Right? And here's a case of basically Biden coming out and saying, yeah, there are some cases where it's okay to classify trans girls as boys. And I worry that if we give an inch on this, then the next time they'll say, well, we had a good reason then. Here's another good reason. And here's another good reason. And here's another good reason. And all of a sudden you go from, oh, well, that was supposed to be just for sports, but now maybe it's about bathrooms. Now maybe it's about, adult locker rooms. Now maybe it's about, rape trauma centers. I look at that and I see the parade of terribles, to borrow a term from our conservative people who always argue on the other side of things. And I see a parade of terribles that comes out of all of this. But when I say that, I'm shouted down, right? Because it's you can't say anything. You can't say that. I don't think that's the case. They'll say you can't criticize Biden because it gives ammunition, blah, 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 blah. And it's really frustrating for me because I see a lot of potential bad outcomes to this and only a handful of good outcomes to all of this.
Yeah, I just remember the day it was released and seeing so many people celebrating, seeing some confused headlines, and then I'm on Erin Reed's her Substack email, and she was like, "No, y'all, this is not it. This is not good." And I was like, oh shit, I need to take a closer look at this.
Yeah. So Aaron got a lot of pushback from a lot of different people about that Substack article and actually DM'd me about it. And it's like, hey, like, reading this, right? And I'm like, yeah, like, I think both, all sides of this have their points, but I think that your read on it is like pretty close at the very least. And, Aaron and I, we're cool. We don't talk a lot. So when she messages me, it's kind of a big deal, right? Because that means we're trying to figure shit out.
Yes. And it's two people I'd love to have like figuring it out, right? Two very smart people who know these issues.
But yeah, it's a tough situation all around. The sense that I get is that the administration is afraid of the athlete question. And I think there's a lot of Democrats who are afraid of the athlete question, including some trans people who hold state office are afraid of that issue as well. And I wish they wouldn't be. But, I'm just a lowly journalist. So,
well, it just like takes me back to like, again, abortion and trans rights, and all of this is interrelated, and like same groups doing these same things of like, okay, well, abortion is bad at 20 weeks. Okay, well, what about 15? Like, I just see it like this, like, let's just get a crack. Let's just get like daylight, and then we can expand it until all of a sudden there's no protections.
Exactly. And actually, I don't know if you saw Nebraska earlier this week. Did you see this?
I feel like yes, but there's been so many terribles. I think you're gonna need to remind me.
So the conservatives there, unsurprisingly, were trying to work through a transgender youth healthcare ban, which is a different issue, which was one I think we've talked about before in a previous episode.
Yes.
And I don't want to dive into that, but it will be unsurprising to you and many of your listeners that one of the conservative lawmakers decided to introduce an amendment to that bill, which would introduce a 12-week abortion ban as part of their trans youth healthcare ban.
That sounds right. It's the same people.
Turns out we were right all along.
Yeah. And it's like the same conversation I keep bringing into every time we're having like the Miffy conversation is like, this isn't staying here, like this is going into trans healthcare too. Like we need to make sure we're keeping the eye on all of the balls, not just like Miffy.
Yeah. And you're starting to see like, it's moving past sports and the youth question. Like Texas, one of their state agencies, I think, proposed they kind of played it as a anti-trans measure, but really it was like gendered required dress codes.
Oh.
Yeah, that basically amounted to cis women can't wear pants at work.
Ugh.
And it's like, yeah, that's what happens when you start policing gender. It's like, this is where it goes.
I just and we're starting to see the inklings of this heading into like the global space of like not wanting like gender-based violence is starting to get pushed back in like certain circles like talking about it, and you're just like starting to see the like cracks showing up in any of the like gender work of like I can feel it coming, man, and it's I'm worried.
Yeah, I mean, the Equal Rights Amendment has popped back into the news recently, and the main conservative argument against it these days is that, oh no, it's going to give those transgenders some rights.
That's great. Let's give them rights. That sounds amazing.
No, that's not what they want.
Okay. So that's all terrible.
Yes.
Ugh. Again, we're going to have a good reason. You're going to come on for a good reason. But what can our audience do? Like, there is so much happening. Like, is there anything we should be doing right now? I know.
Oh, gosh. I really just want your listeners to have an open mind on the athlete question. And it's okay if you end up not agreeing completely with what I've said today. That's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person. But I don't want you to just think about all of the athletes growing up and how all of the boys like dominated the women. I actually have a quick anecdote about that because I was not a great athlete. I was tall, and that helped a lot, especially in basketball. And then my school had this amazing girls basketball player who like scored 2,000 points in her career and went on to play Division I college basketball. And is just an absolute legend. And she was a grade above me. And I remember her senior year, the two of us played one on one in like gym class, and I ended up beating her by a point. Now, I was not a 2,000 point scorer. I think I was a 200 point scorer. Like, to be honest with you, I barely beat her. It was actually a really close, like, back and forth game. And we ended up talking about it a couple of years ago after I transitioned because I had written an article, God, in 2017 or 18 and put it on Facebook, which I no longer do because yikes. Uh,
For obvious reasons.
but we got into like conversation in the comments, and I was like, yeah, like the only reason that I beat you is because I was stronger, basically. And I was like out muscled her for a couple of rebounds and it made the difference. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly how I remember it. I said, if I had been on puberty blockers or estrogen at the time, I think you would have kicked the shit out of me. She goes, I know I would have.
Yes.
And, I was 6'2". She was 6 feet. She was a little bit shorter than me. Like, I keep going back to that when I'm thinking about like these kids. I don't know what I would have done. When I was a kid, I chose to stay in the closet. It was a different time. It was the 90s. It was the early 2000s. Like, being gay in my high school was like a not great thing. And I was in a very progressive area.
Small rural high school. Same.
Yes.
I didn't exist in my high school.
So like, coming out was not in the cards for me. But the way I dealt with the closet was through sports. And I think if you plot me into today's environment, I would still have been an athlete in high school. And I don't know if I would have made it if I had to choose between sports and my gender, if I thought I had the chance to come out and transition. I did want to address one thing too, because the argument that I get a lot is, well, why can't these trans girls play boy sports? And I would like your audience to think about, when was the last time you heard about an openly trans woman playing on a men's sports team? I'm an expert in this. Like, I have a degree in sport management and I have never discovered one. Okay. At any level, high school, college, like, I'm sure it's happened in high school. I don't think it's ever happened in college. It's certainly never happened professionally. And I want people to think about why that might be the case, because there have been trans women athletes over the years. This issue actually first came to the fore in 1972 when Renee Richards sued for the right to play on the women's professional tennis tour. And people back then were saying this is the end of women's sports. And here we are, 50 years later.
It's the end.
And women's sports has never been bigger, right? So I don't think playing on the boys' team is a thing that is realistic, especially for somebody who is young and is on puberty blockers or is on cross-sex hormones, on estrogen specifically. I don't think that's a safe situation for them. We know that trans women lose performance. There's a lot of people who argue they don't lose enough performance to play on the women's team, but we know they lose a significant amount of performance. I struggle sometimes to open jars now. That's kind of the running joke in the trans community, is you start taking estrogen, you can't even open jars anymore. That's not a viable alternative. And that's why when I say, if you're banning trans girls from girls' sports, it is a ban on trans girls from playing sports. And I just wanted to leave people with that.
Well, Katelyn, as always, even if it is about horrible things, it is always a joy to talk to you.
Well, thank you. I got to recount my, homophobic high school days. So
yes. Okay, y'all. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Katelyn. As always, I had so much fun talking to her. She is just wonderful. And someday, I will have Katelyn on to talk about something that is just happiness and joy, because there is good news. And not more bad news. But today was not that day, but it will happen. If you have questions or a topic you would like us to cover, as always, please feel free to shoot me an email. It's Jennie, JENNIE, at reprosfightback.com. Or you can reach out to us on social media. We're at rePROs Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, or rePROs FB on Instagram. Otherwise, I will see y'all in 2 weeks. Bye! For more information, including show notes from this episode and previous episodes, please visit us at our website at reprosfightback.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at rePROs Fight Back and on Instagram at rePROs FB. If you like our show, please help others find it by sharing it with your friends, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.